Hello there! Surprise! I'm the Podcast Meister and welcome to the channel. We are celebrating as this is my 10th video and therefore I thought it's time to level up, come out from behind the animations and show myself. Also, as I wanted to personally thank all of my subscribers for following the channel, of whom there are at the time of the recording 156, which is simply awesome. It means that there are potentially at least 156 people around the world whom I could help to find the right and potentially their first podcast equipment to start their show, and if so, then it was worth it. And I will continue to strive to live up to your expectations and deliver content that you value. You are fantastic. Stay here, and if you haven't yet, consider subscribing. So let's get into it. This is part 4 of the Big Podcast Equipment Guide for 2021, where you will learn what devices you will need to set up a podcast for up to 10 persons participating, including up to 4 remote guests dialing in. You see, ever since I started to be interested in podcasting, I was desperately looking for a guide that seemingly did not exist. One that tells me what equipment is needed if you want to set up and record a podcast that has more than one person involved. Say 2 or 3 or even up to 8 people being present. That's fairly easy, by the way. Things get slightly more complicated when you want to add a remote guest. Or 2 or 3 or 4. And that's when the confusion usually kicks in. And this is exactly what we will find out one by one. And by the end of it, hopefully, you'll have much more clarity about what you actually need as we tick off one by one each scenario. And this is what this series is all about. In the previous part, we have covered the devices that were, in my view, capable of handling the situations where 3 persons were present and up to 4 remote guests were to dial in the most cost-effective way. Next, we will cover the scenarios where 4 persons are present, while still covering the cases if 1, 2, 3 or 4 remote guests should be interviewed on the show. There are many ways for an efficient podcast setup. In fact, when preparing for this video, I have listed over 150 different options. However, some simply don't make sense, like buying a Rodecaster Pro for a solo podcast. And I've also followed some basic principles with my device choices to ensure good quality and reliable audio recording, and also taking care of your hard-earned cash. First, if you want good audio, get a microphone. As with them, you will make a quantum leap in audio quality. You see, there's a reason why in the last 100 years, every quality broadcast used a microphone. My setups will always calculate with one for each person present. Second, record everyone on a separate track. Otherwise, post-production editing will be a nightmare. I will only recommend setups in which this is possible. Third, prefer hardware over software, as software may and will crash. And when it crashes, it will crash right in the middle of that once-in-a-lifetime interview that you can't repeat. Other than that, looking at the subscription prices, I'm not sure it even makes a lot of sense. Which leads me to number 4, avoid subscriptions when you are a beginner and you can solve it with hardware. Quality services start at $15 to $20 a month, which will reach the flipping point when compared to investing in hardware in about a year or 2 for most podcasters. Hardware is cheaper for beginners and generally more reliable. And finally, number 5, get what you need and not what others have. Don't buy expensive stuff because top podcasters use them. Buy the ones that cover your needs instead. With that, let's get started. On to the cases where we have 4 people in the room who may want to talk to some remote guests as well. I wanted to start right away with the usual format and list you the devices and prices that are capable of hosting 4 present participants and then add remote guests to the equation. Believe it or not, but I actually had the video ready to publish a week ago. And that is where Rode, the microphone company Rode, completely hijacked this release. No, not directly. I mean, the channel is not that big yet for Rode to reach out to me directly and generally for them to be interested at all in my release roadmap. But what they did is that they have launched the RØDECONNECT app a week ago. Or software. I don't know how we call these nowadays. It's for Mac and Windows. And it's amazing. Amazing. But before I get into it, let me tell you that it is potentially as much of a game changer as the RØDECaster Pro was, or is. You see, USB microphones gained a lot of popularity nowadays. They are cheap, they can be plugged into your computer directly without having to use an extra audio interface, which is the case with professional or less professional microphones with a 3-pole XLR connection, and many of them actually give you a fantastic sounding voice that is way better than whatever laptop mic or headset would provide you. The problem is, or shall we say, one of the problems is that you can't plug in 2 USB microphones into the same computer, as the audio management of computers are not generally designed for sophisticated audio routing. You see, there were already other proprietary software for different USB microphones that help you enhance the capability of any given mic, for the given mic that this proprietary software was for, beyond just simply converting your voice into a digital signal. Most notable, the Elgato Wave mics or the Presonus Revelator came with an accompanying app that enabled many things like routing in different audio sources other than your microphone to the mix, adding effects to your voice, and essentially making themselves seen by your computer as several new audio sources. They could even enable you to set up a conversation on a third-party communication app like Zoom or Skype or Teams, so that you could create a custom mix for the others in the call from whatever sounds you had on your computer. What they did not make possible is, however, to plug in yet another USB microphone of the same kind into your computer. This used to be more or less impossible, unless you had a specific software for audio routing like the Audio Hijack or Loopback, which are fairly expensive, by the way, until now. You see, what Rode did is that on top of providing basically all what the others do as well, like enabling you to route in your system sounds like music from Spotify or TED Talks from YouTube, they made it possible with this free software that it takes care of this complex audio routing, and as a result, you can plug in as many as 4 USB mics into your computer, and the software, RØDECONNECT, will handle it. Okay, the catch here is that it only works with the Rode NT-USB mini microphone for now, which is, by the way, a sub €100 microphone with great audio quality. No doubt, Rode would not open it up for the myriad of USB mics on the market, why would they? But I'm quite sure that they will open it up for other Rode mics and potentially will release a whole new family of microphones, maybe even ones with a USB and an XLR connection, just as Shure did recently with their MV7. Now, this is not all. Of course, this is huge in itself, and so far you could not easily do it. Now it's plug and play, provided that you have the right microphones. But then, to make it even more amazing, they have included a virtual channel which you can set as the input-output of a dedicated communication app like Zoom, Skype or MS Teams, and then you can involve someone from or participate in a call from any of these apps. The beauty of it is that it automatically sets up the so-called mix minus for you, which makes sure that the other side of the call does not hear an annoying echo of their own voice routed back to them while talking. With the others, it is a manual effort. Not rocket science, but still, it's not plug and play either. I left the best for last, and this is a widely overlooked feature. Very few reviewers have mentioned it in their initial videos about it. You see, it's not only an audio routing and mixing app that happens to have effects like a compressor, a de-esser, a big bottom, and an oral exciter, like the RØDECaster. But what really sets it apart from its competitors in a big way, that it is a recorder as well. A recorder. Nobody else did that so far. You can push a nice big button and record whatever you have to say along with your system sounds and a VoIP conversation out of the box. What makes it absolutely insanely good for podcasters in itself. But that's again not all. There is a setting that makes it possible to record all this, wait for it, in multi-track. Jesus Christ. I mean, this used to be the biggest challenge when recording a podcast so far, the one that caused the most headache and used to cost the most money. Now it is a selection in a drop-down menu. So to summarize what RØDECONNECT does in 5 simple points that others don't. First, they allow for more than one, actually up to 4 of the NT-USB mini mics to be plugged into the same laptop and used at the same time. 2, automatic mix minus for all microphones and for the virtual channel is built in to be able to lead and record remote calls, as well as it is not only a companion app for custom audio routing, but it is an audio recorder as well. And not only is it an audio recorder, it is a multi-track audio recorder. And finally, it lets you export your recordings to popular podcast services right away from the app. And also you can export it at a desired volume level, which is normally lots of trial and error for beginner podcasters who are working, for instance, in GarageBand, and their exported show is notoriously quiet or not consistent from episode to episode. Here, it takes care of it for you. So I had to ditch the original version of my video to be able to tell you that this is actually the most cost-effective, clean, and awesome-looking solution for recording a podcast with up to 4 participants present and with maximum 1 remote guest dialing in on top. It is because the software is free and you only need to buy as many NT-USB mini microphones as many people will be present on the show. And again, the NT-USB mini is a sub €100 microphone, which means that for the 4 present no remote guest scenario, it is less than €400. No one comes even close to that. Even less come close to that in the 4 present 1 remote scenario. Note that I am not affiliated with Rode in any way. I'm just genuinely blown away by this solution and by some of the other solutions as well, like the Rodecaster Pro, but there I have some criticisms as well, mainly in the cost department and in the size department. So with that out of the way, let's get it cracking with the other solutions, because as amazing as it may be, it does not take care for the scenarios where you want to have a second remote guest. Well, with Rode having crashed onto the very first place of being the most clean and cost-effective solution for having 4 persons present in the same room without a remote guest, let's take a look at the other setups that can handle it. This is actually the most densely populated scenario where you have many options to choose from, 9 actually, including RØDECONNECT. So let's have a look at options 2 to 6. On second place, the absolute cheapest hardware on the market that is natively capable of 4-track USB multitrack recording is the Soundcraft Notepad 12 FX mixer. You need to only pay attention to what you select to send out on USB tracks 3 and 4 in the Soundcraft USB audio control panel. Oh, it's a hard one too. Because tracks 1 and 2 are by default sending out mic channels 1 and 2 respectively. For USB tracks 3 and 4, you'll need to select channels 3 and 4. This you'll have to do on your computer. The control panel is not available on mobile devices. Considering it also needs a headphone amp, it will set you back with €706. Now, the little wonder, the Zoom P4, my personal favorite, is still on this list, as it does have 4 XLR inputs, even though if you start involving remote guests, which you happily can, thanks to the double built-in mix minus feature, one always gets occupied, but still, as long as you don't go over 4 overall participants and over 2 remote guests, you can use it in any remaining combination. Confused? We have listed all before, and every time even a single remote guest was involved, see the 1 present 1 remote, 1 present 2 remote, 2 present 1 or 2 remote, and 3 present 1 remote, and now of course the 4 present no remote scenario. It almost always comes out as the clear winner. Choosing this is also the last chance you can stay below €800. Slightly. Fourth, the Allen & Heath multi-track mixer is still in the race, but it needs a headphone amp to be able to hand out headphones to each participant, as it only provides you with a single headphone port built in. Due to this, even though the device itself can be found slightly cheaper than the Zoom P4, the kit price with cabling is more expensive. Thanks to its starting price, hopefully not just for the market introduction, I keep putting the Behringer Flow 8 digital multi-track mixer to the same group. It too has 4 XLR inputs for 4 microphones, but its capabilities reach way beyond those. way beyond those of the Allen Heath analog mixer, due to, for example, its smartphone controls, which include, for example, the compressor, the low-cut filter, but mostly because beyond the 4 people being present, it can handle 2 remote guests as well, and that it sends out 10 channels via USB for recording. All this with the 4 mics and headphones for €842. The 6th option would be the Zoom H6 with its 4 XLR inputs, a wonderful device, which unfortunately has not been designed for podcasting at all, but it still can handle it very well if you add the headphone splitter, like with the previous 2 options. Quite a price increase as well, with its $950 price tag for the whole setup. While you could argue that certain audio interfaces can do the job as well, those which have 4 XLR inputs indeed can, but they are way more expensive than either the Zoom PodTrack P4 or any of the 3 mixers listed, so I did not include either the Focusrite Scarlett 18i8 or the Steinberg UR44C here. I wouldn't buy any of them over the options listed here. Options 7, 8 and 9 are our usual suspects. The Zoom L8 for €967, the Rode RØDECONNECT Pro and the Zoom PodTrack P8 for both €1,067, including microphones and headphones. For the extra €100 over the price of the Zoom L8, you get of course a lot of podcast specific features like a compressor, USB mix minus, that's important, then switchable phantom power for individual channels versus the LiveTrack L8 where you can only switch it on for all or for none, high quality display with touchscreen, and generally speaking a workflow designed for podcasting. But what if you want to add the remote guest still? Well, the RØDECONNECT solution smashed this scenario as well, and you'll only pay for the 4 anti-USB mini microphones. Unbeatable, clean, and elegant. The only slight downside is that it is a software, not a hardware. If you do want to solve it with the hardware, well, you still have a lot of options. Also, 8 further on top of the RØDECONNECT. Actually, however, the Allen & Heath mixer is once for all out of the game. I have grouped options 2, 3 and 4 together as they are the ones still below €1,000. These are the Behringer Flow 8, the Zoom LiveTrack L8 and the Zoom H6. For the Behringer Flow 8 you'll need an iRig 2 adapter for the remote guest and a headphone amp, which due to the unfortunate design of the Zoom H6 resulting in a single headphone port is also needed there. Kit prices are €885, €967 and €992. Of course, the most portable of these, and will remain so if you look at the later options for this scenario as well, is the Zoom H6, and amazingly, it can handle a remote guest as well on top of the 4 people present and plugged into its 4 XLR port. However, I'm afraid setting it up is kind of a nightmare. 3 splitters, cables everywhere. You really need to pay attention to what you plug where. As far as setting up the monitor mix for the remote guest is sort of similar as with the digital mixers, only on a smaller screen and a lot more cables. As for the more expensive options, you can either vote for the absolute convenience of the built-in mix minus function on either the 2 podcast dedicated devices, the Rode RØDECONNECT Pro and the Zoom PodTrack P8, or with the Tascam Model 12, albeit with the Tascam you'll need to use a headphone amp or splitter, and it is also more expensive at €1,178 versus the all-in-one podcast studio's price at €1,077. The choice between these on one hand is what variety you are looking for in terms of how to do mix minus. With the RØDECONNECT you have the choice of calling someone using a phone with a TRRS cable, a phone via Bluetooth or via USB. On the Zoom PodTrack P8 you lose the Bluetooth option as long as you don't have a Bluetooth adapter, but even if you have, then you lose the wired phone call option as the Bluetooth adapter plugs into where the phone cable would plug in normally, and on the Tascam you only have the TRRS cable option. On the other hand, it comes down to what your ambitions are and how much do you want to spend. Of course, if you are a musician, definitely go with the Tascam, as for one, Neither the RODECONNECT Pro nor the Zoom PodTrack P8 have line level inputs, only XLR inputs. I keep forgetting to mention, one really nice feature of the Tascam Model 12 is the analog compressor on the channel strips, which gives you a really smooth voice compression, thereby easier to achieve that Howard Stern-like broadcast sound. If you are a musician in the first place and don't care much if the mix minus is built in because you are confident to set it up yourself using the IRIC2 method, then you have two more options. One is the freshly announced Mackie Onyx 8, which has a lot going on and is carefully marketed at podcasters too. However, I would not choose it over any of the ones mentioned below. Yes, it has USB multi-track recording, and yes, it can also record an SD card, but only the combined stereo track and not multi-track. Plus, it has a Bluetooth input, but it's only an input and there's no mix minus built in any way, so the Bluetooth will not leave the mixer, it just gets into it. It is also quite expensive. For this kit, you'd pay 1,121 euros. You'll need to add an IRIC2 adapter and a headphone amp too. For the similar price or less, you'll get a lot more for podcasting in any other devices listed here, like in the Soundcraft Signature 12 MTK. It's a hardcore mixer, but very capable at a surprisingly affordable price point. You still will need a headphone amp, but here you can actually solve the single remote guest with a USB mix minus, which is not built in, just to avoid any confusions. All but one of these devices you see on the screen are capable of sending out all your channels separately on USB for recording them on discrete audio track, sadly with the exception of the Zoom PodTrack P8, which only sends out the stereo track via USB for now. Let's continue. As you are adding more and more remote guests to the equation, you'll see devices drop out one by one. Adding a second remote guest to the 4 people being present drops, for instance, the Zoom H6. However, adding an additional IRIC2 to the Behringer Flow 8 and the Zoom LiveTrack L8 will get the second remote guest up and running at a cost of 951 euros and 1,055 euros respectively. As for the big guys, adding a second remote guest to mere 4 people being present won't even change the cost for the RODECONNECT Pro and the Zoom PodTrack P8, as they can handle one guest via TRRS and one via USB with built-in mix minus. The reason why the Zoom A6 had been dropped here is that it can only handle one remote guest with that really tedious mix minus setup. Adding a different extension capsule to the top won't help on this either, as it is not the inputs but the outputs that are the limiting factor here, which the different capsules won't change. The Tascam Model 12 can also bring in an additional guest over an IRIC2 into one of its 2 aux ports or its subgroup on top of the first guest called via its built-in mix minus. However, it will not only be more complex to set up, it will also cost quite a bit more, 1,234 euros. You still have the Soundcraft Signature 12 MTK and the Mackie Onyx 8 in the game, and again, if you don't mind setting up the mix minus using the IRIC2 adapter, you can even save some money when compared to the Tascam Model 12. However, by far not enough to justify why would you not go for the Zoom P8 or the RODECONNECT Pro instead. Adding yet another remote guest, we are now at 4 being present and 3 dialing in. It's time for the RODECONNECT Pro to win and to shine. At the same time, sadly, we can see the Zoom PodTrack P8 disappear, as it cannot handle more than 2 remote guests. The setup will still cost you the same 1,077 euros. On second place, we'll have the Soundcraft Signature 12 MTK with 3 aux ends and a separate channel for the USB input. It has no trouble accommodating this many participants. For this particular setup, you'll need a headphone amp and 2 IRIC2 adapters, setting up the 3rd remote guest over USB to save some money, ending up with having to spend only 5 euros more than with the RODECONNECT Pro. Third is the Zoom LiveTrack L8 digital mixer, and it could even handle one more remote guest, although then it could only have 3 present at a cost of 1,121 euros, as one of the remote guests would be hosted through the TRRS connection with its built-in mix minus. You'll only need 2 IRIC2s plus a headphone amp for everyone to have a headphone output. The 4th option is the Tascam Model 12 with a similar setup than the Zoom L8, as it too has a TRRS input with built-in mix minus, although the iRigs for the two remaining remote guests have to be set up with a little more fine touch. Also, a headphone amp is needed for the same reason as with the Zoom L8. Kit price goes up to €1,244. Next up is the Zoom LiveCheck L12, which has all the convenience and ease of use of its little brother, the L8, sadly without the built-in mix-minus feature. Therefore, you'll need 3 iRig 2 adapters and a headphone amp to comfort every participant. There's still some room upwards in terms of its capabilities, but scalability has its price. It will set you back with €1,300. Last, the fresh out of the oven Mackie Onyx 12. Well, fresh out of the oven, it's from January this year. This is one size bigger than the Onyx 8 and has faders instead of knobs, as well as a third auxiliary port to set up remote guests using 3 pieces of iRig 2 adapters and a headphone amp. It keeps the USB multi-track capabilities, as well as it records a stereo master on the SD card, none of which explains why you would pay more for it and choose it over the others above. There are 4 options should you want to have 4 people present and 4 remote guests at the same time, although I would only really recommend one of them, which is the Zoom LiveCheck L12. It does need 4 iRig 2s and a headphone amp to set it up, but thanks to its 4 flexibly mixable monitor outputs B, C, D, and E, with A being the headphone port for those who are present, splitted by the headphone amp, it is a breeze to set up the mix-minus, whereas with the other choices, it requires a lot of attention, what you plug where, plus which knob you turn or which button you push. An example for it is the Tascam Model 12. One remote guest is cleared with the TRRS input, the second and third through the AUX 1 and AUX 2. See my explanation on the mix-minus on an analog mixer in another video. And the fourth remote guest has to be set up using the, by the way, amazing subgroup option. Here you can easily select which channels go to the subgroup output by pushing the dedicated sub button on each channel strip. You still need 3 iRigs and a headphone amp, but despite the TRRS option, it is not a very clean setup compared to the L12 to the left of it. Both of these would cost you €1,366, and both are simply amazing pieces of gear if you want to pay this kind of money. If not, you are not out of options. More than €100 cheaper comes the Behringer X18 digital mixer that you would control with one of your smart devices or a computer. It has 16 XLR inputs and 6 aux ports with a 1/4-inch output. Its stage variant, the XR18, has XLR outputs instead for the monitor mixes. It's an amazing piece of gear, especially considering its price, but there's a steep learning curve if you want to set up the routing correctly for all 4 iRig 2 adapters. The headphone amp is the easy part, but you still need it, even though you can use the free aux ports as headphone ports, as you have only 2 left plus the normal headphone port, whereas you need 4, so better have it. You can also set up a USB mix-minus somehow, and then you won't need it, but I could not yet figure it out and test it, and test a solid solution on how to do it. If Behringer happens to send me one of these devices, I'm happy to test it. It's a difficult routing. Your actually cheapest option, however, is not this, but the Soundcraft Signature 12 MTK, and it has not even reached the end of its capabilities yet. You can set up the 4 remote guests with it using 3 iRig 2 adapters and the 4th one using USB. It also needs a headphone amp and manages to stay below €1,200 with all microphones, headphones and adapters included. With that, we are done with all scenarios with 4 people present. Not much left anymore. If you managed it to the end, congratulations. It was probably the longest list I've ever made you to listen to. However, considering that the device is being able to accommodate 4 XLR microphones is by far the most densely populated scheme, I imagine the companies who are in the business of creating such devices made their homework and found that this is what people want. So it might just have been worth going through all of them. Now, I did make the overview about 5, 6, 7, and 8 people being present and adding up to 4 remote guests to it. However, I expect these scenarios are so rare that I will actually not dedicate a full video of them. That is, if you don't want me to, as then I'll happily make them, of course. Let me know in the comments below. Instead, what I plan to do is to create the short summary of all the scenarios from the solo podcaster up to the max 10 participants, but I will not list all the options, but only the ones I actually recommend for each scenario. And that would include every scenario, even those with the 5, 6, 7, 8 participants being present. And I will spice it up for you with some extra infos so that you will be able to make an educated decision on what you should be buying for your show. Please subscribe and hit the bell icon to be notified of the upcoming videos, and give a big old thumbs up to make this video easier to find for those looking for help in this area. Good luck with the setups and cheers. Bye.